Jayom Vishnupad Paramhansa Paribrajakacharya Astotara Sata Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sikoho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Arigor Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinatha Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Ki Jai, Ganga Mai Ki Jai, Jamuna Mai Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. We're continuing the reading of Srila Prabhupada Lilamrita Volume 3, Chapter 3, New Jagannath Puri. It's one of the longest chapters. So, last week Upendra was introduced, and now that he's initiated, we're just in the middle of the initiation ceremony. Prabhupada walks up to his apartment, and Upendra now speaks. Someone reminded me that I should go upstairs and give Swamiji an offering. So I decided to give him a baby blanket and a beach towel. It wasn't that I lacked money, but these things had some sentimental value to me, so I wanted to give them to Swamiji. I went upstairs to his room, and he was sitting at the foot of his mattress. I came in and bowed down and presented him with the baby blanket and the beach towel. He held them up in his fingers and looked at them both in each of his hands. Now Upendra, he had a job. He worked in the post office, and he would work till midnight every night. He had money, but he didn't quite understand the principle of Guru Dakshina. So he was giving things that were of value to him. Let's see what Prabhupada feels about them. He said, "These things are useless," and he tossed them down on the floor. I was hurt, and I had nothing to say. I just sat there. After a while, I excused myself and went back to my apartment. So later, as the devotees learned from their mistakes, what they should do and what they shouldn't do, Prabhupada eventually, he wrote us a letter describing the types of gifts that you're supposed to give to the spiritual master. And these were Vedic gifts, asan, shoes, things that were grains, things that the spiritual master could either use in his personal service or use in the service of his devotees. Prabhupada deemed these things as useless. The next day, I went to see Swamiji during his evening visiting time, and he had the beach towel and the baby blanket out on the floor like rugs, so that his guests who came to visit could have something to sit on. So this is the yukta-vairagya principle. Even these useless things, such as ourselves, useless disciples, he found a way to engage everything in Krishna's service. I felt satisfaction that he had found some use for my offerings. Prabhupada said that Upendra was not living up to his vows. Now, how did Prabhupada know? Was Prabhupada watching? Since he was still living with his girlfriend. Upendra felt guilty about breaking the principles forbidding illicit sex and intoxication. He had just taken his vows. Prabhupada asked him, "Can you follow the vows?" He didn't even know what they were, but he said that he could. And it turns out that he wasn't following the vows. Somehow or other, as Chaitya Guru, Prabhupada understood. He wanted to tell Swamiji, but couldn't bring himself to do it. Upendra felt guilty about breaking the principles forbidding illicit sex and intoxication, but he just couldn't follow them. He wanted to tell Swamiji, but couldn't bring himself to do it. Besides, he thought, even if he confessed, how could he stop? Upendra's girlfriend didn't like Krishna consciousness, didn't want to meet Swamiji, and didn't want to come to the temple. So Prabhupada decided that instead of marrying Upendra to her, he would save Upendra from her. So this would happen sometimes. There would be couples, and one would be interested in Krishna consciousness, and one wouldn't want to have anything to do with Krishna consciousness. Another devotee joined later, and he tried to make his girlfriend Krishna conscious. They had been fiancés, waiting to get married after they graduated from college, but she wanted nothing to do with Krishna. She told him that she hated Krishna because Krishna took her boyfriend away from her. And he would give her gifts. He gave her a bottle of shampoo with the beautiful picture of Krishna on it. And she took the shampoo, and with a knife, she scraped off the picture of Krishna. He invited her to come to the temple when Prabhupada was visiting. Some people, unfortunately, they don't have the sukriti to be attracted to Krishna consciousness. And that's why in our preaching, it's not that we have any attractive potency. We are simply representatives of our spiritual master in Krishna. And depending upon the sukriti of the people that we meet, they will either be attracted to Krishna consciousness or averse to Krishna consciousness. But our duty is to offer Krishna consciousness to everyone. Prabhupada decided to make Upendra a Brahmachari. Although Srila Prabhupada had about 25 San Francisco disciples, hardly any were Brahmacharis. Practically, the only solid one was Jayananda, who was a little older than the rest. Jayananda worked all day driving a cab, chanting Hare Krishna even while driving. And when he was off work, he would be at the temple, cooking or doing any service he could find, or sitting with Prabhupada in his apartment with the other devotees. So Jayananda was a very great saintly devotee. He was an engineering graduate, but he left his profession, and he decided to become, we had read about him a few weeks ago, how he had seen the advertisement of Prabhupada coming to the airport. He went to the airport and saw Prabhupada and immediately started coming to the temple. And in order to support the temple, even though he was a graduate, engineering graduate, he drove a cab. That way from morning till night he was able to collect money for the temple. And when he was finished driving his taxi, he would come and throw the trash out, clean the temple, clean the stoves, help with the cooking. And he was known for just being able to do any service at all for Krishna. There's a beautiful book about him. You can read about his life, how devoted he was to Srila Prabhupada up to the end of his life. He was known for his serious japa. Sitting cross-legged, eyes squeezed tightly shut, he would hold his strand of beads up in both hands and rock forward almost to the floor and back, chanting intensely, oblivious to the outside world. He was serious, and that was the only way one could remain a brahmachari. In New York, Prabhupada had about a dozen brahmacharis, but a more permissive attitude among his followers in San Francisco made brahmachari life more difficult because of the hippie mentality, free love. So the men and women were joining together there in San Francisco. But Jayananda, he wasn't that type. He wasn't a hippie. He was very highly educated and very dedicated to Srila Prabhupada on all levels. He did finally marry, But his wife, because he was so fully engaged in Prabhupada's service, his wife left him, and he just remained a brahmachari continually, preaching and president of the temple and leading the devotees, always setting the most perfect example in devotional service. In the original Vedic society of ancient India, brahmachari life began at the age of 5. Parents would send their son to live with the guru at the gurukula, where the boy would receive basic education, spiritual instruction, and strict moral discipline under the guru. Even Lord Krishna, in his transcendental pastimes on earth, had attended a gurukula and very humbly served his spiritual master. Now, especially this time, we didn't hear in the 26 Second Avenue Temple about little children, right? Can anyone remember? The only thing we heard about little children was that the Puerto Rican girls outside would make a disturbance, and that the lawyer Stephen Goldsmith would sometimes bring his children, and they really liked the prasadam and the atmosphere in the temple. But no little children were joining. Rupanuga had a son, but his wife at that time was a little wary and did not immediately join along with Rupanuga. But in San Francisco, it was quite different. Because of all of the free love and free sex and all of the communes and the hippie mentality, there were lots of children, lots and lots. And these were all little children being brought up in the hippie mentality. In fact, this little boy here in the picture, this is Dwarkadish. Prabhupada used to call him Mr. DDD, Dwarka Dish Das, DDD. So he was the son of a hippie woman. She was attracted to Prabhupada. She joined here. Her name was wonderful, wonderful preacher, La Bangalatika Devi Dasi. And he was her son. So now that the husbands and the wives and all their kids were joining in San Francisco Prabhupada event, he realized we're going to have to take care of these children because they're joining along with their parents. So by 1972, now it's just 1967, by 1972, Prabhupada had assigned Satsvarup Maharaj, he had taken sannyas by then, and Jayananda and Nandarani, and a number of other of his senior disciples to open up a gurukula at Dallas, Texas. And this is Srila Prabhupada teaching Mr. DDD how to write the Sanskrit alphabet, the akshars. See how Prabhupada's, such a loving relationship they had. Mr. DDD used to write letters to Prabhupada, and you can read those letters in the archives. This is a picture of the Gurukula with the teachers and the students. There's Mr. DDD in the center there, next to Prabhupada and all the other young boys, girls and boys together there. Up to a certain age, about the age of 10, Prabhupada allowed the girls and boys to study together. But after that, there was a separation, and then the older boys became brahmacharis. That's when they were brought here. And although we had girls here, Prabhupada did not allow us to make a girls' gurukula. It could be, he said that they could do that in Mayapur, because Mayapur, Prabhupada had planned a whole township, a Vaishnav township of 10,000 devotees with families, and that way girls could be trained, boys could be trained, but not in Vrindavan. When the Gurukul closed down later in 1976, the brahmacharis were brought here to Vrindavan for training as brahmacharis. So all these older boys that you see, the teachers and the boys, they all came here to Vrindavan when the Gurukula closed. Here you'll see the boys and girls all together, the women teachers also training the boys. The basic principle of brahmachari life was celibacy. By practicing celibacy, the Brahmachari would develop great powers of memory and sensory control. And if such a trained Brahmachari later decided to take a wife, his sex life would be regulated, not licentious. But although Brahmachari life was necessary for a healthy society, its practice had declined even before Prabhupada was raised. Within the Gaudiya Math, it had been revived. So we never heard of Srila Prabhupada attending a gurukula when he was a child. He attended a Marwari primary school that was in the same complex where he lived. And then he attended the Scottish, the Seals Church, the Motilal Seal primary school and secondary school. And after that, the Scottish Church, the Scottish Church College, where he found out about celibate monks, and he respected the fathers, the Pedros, very much in the college, because he saw that they were genuine in their faith, in their dedication to education. So he learned a lot from the teachers, the professors in his college, and he looked up to them. But until Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati took up the mission of the Gaudiya Math, because of the apasampradayas and the dilution, when something becomes diluted, the diluted philosophy of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, there was no practicing brahmacharya at that time. We didn't hear about it. Even Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, they didn't attend gurukulas. They were attending English-speaking schools, getting an education that way because the English were ruling India at that time. And then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, he changed the course by establishing the Gaudiya Maths and having young boys join, becoming brahmacharis, becoming sannyasis, and Prabhupada carried that on in ISKCON. And many of these boys that you see here, although the Gurukul life was difficult, they grew up, they became grihastas, or they remained brahmacharis, and they still attest that their Gurukula training made them very strong individuals. Some of them even entered into the military. And military life for them was easier than the Gurukula because they had learned discipline already when they were brahmacharis in the Gurukula. Although brahmachari life was necessary for a healthy society, its practice had declined even before Prabhupada was raised. But in America, the situation was, of course, much worse. Srimad-Bhagavatam tells of a young Brahmin, a Jamil, who fell from spiritual life because he had seen a drunken man embracing a half-naked prostitute. In America, to see a half-naked prostitute in public was not uncommon. As soon as a brahmachari walked out on the street, he would confront so many allurements. But Prabhupada was convinced that brahmacharis could protect themselves, even in America, if they regularly chanted Hare Krishna and sincerely tried to follow the rules and regulations. Krishna would protect them. Now, America, you see, America is a very big country. It's 3,000 miles big. And right now, Prabhupada is on the West Coast, the sunshine state of California. And because of the nice weather and the beautiful atmosphere and this hippie revolution, the counterculture, there was so much promiscuity going on. And women, men, forget about marriage. It was just a big love-in. So these young boys and girls, as Prabhupada called them, they were attracted to Krishna consciousness, and they were joining at the same time with their children. And Prabhupada had to figure out a social system by which they could become Krishna conscious, even living together as boys and girls. So some, very few, became brahmacharis at this time, such as Jayananda, although he was older and he wasn't a hippie. So now, back to the original reason why we're reading about this, Prabhupada saw the problem with Upendra. His girlfriend wasn't interested in Krishna, so he didn't want him to marry her. So he decided now it's time to make brahmacharis. So, and in America, you go out, your senses are completely, now we see it in Delhi also. We see it, the Jain furniture advertisements here in Vrindavan, the beautiful women on the, I mean, it's even here in Vrindavan now. So it's, you know, from the West it's seeped into India as well, where you see these half-naked women all over the place. And they have dress codes for Vrindavan, but who, you know, you can't kick people out. So, but we try to set a good example. This is why Prabhupada had the women wear saris and the men wear dhoti kurta, because this is the dress of Vaikuntha. So that when people see us, their soul within is reminded of the spiritual world. And that's why we maintain our uniforms of sari and dhoti kurta. Prabhupada had decided to ask Upendra to come and live with him as his personal servant. Prabhupada's former servant, Ranchor, had recently left his position. Although supposedly a brahmachari, he had never been a serious brahmachari. He had even seduced one of the young women devotees in New York. Prabhupada had found out and had asked the girl why she had indulged in sex with Ranchor if she wasn't planning to marry him. Prabhupada's why had so disarmed the girl that she had been unable to answer. Prabhupada had admonished her, "You girls should not make yourselves so cheap," and had given Ranchor another chance. So the girl, when I was doing Sankirtan in New York, she told me about this incident. I won't give the names because we're not here to speak about people in particular, but she told me what happened. That she had just joined, and Ranchor had seduced her, and she thought that she had become pregnant. And she went to Prabhupada and told him that, "Prabhupada, I'm afraid I'm pregnant, this is the person." And Ranchor, by that time, Prabhupada had given him a very appropriate name. He had run away by that time. So otherwise, it would have been easy. You just, you know, Prabhupada could have married her to Ranchor. But he had gone. He had left. So she was in a great dismay. What should she do? She thought she was pregnant, so she went and, you know, explained it to Prabhupada. So Prabhupada called a meeting. This is what she told me. He called a meeting amongst all the devotees at 26 Second Avenue and told them what happened. And he asked them, "Who will marry her?" It's Prabhupada. And everyone was silent. You know, who wanted to marry someone? So one of the brahmachari, one of the boys, he decided, he said, "Well, if it's going to please Prabhupada, then I will volunteer to marry her." So he raised his hand, he said, "Prabhupada, I'll marry her." And there they are in the picture. And Prabhupada got them married and sent them off to open a temple in Boston. And they did so much service for Prabhupada. They didn't have any children. She wasn't pregnant. But Ranchor never became serious. After playing the drums, because if you remember, when Prabhupada was taking his first airplane ride from New York to Los Angeles, Ranchor had collected enough money to buy a ticket. So the devotees decided to send him as Prabhupada's personal servant. And as soon as he landed in San Francisco, because New York is so different, the East Coast is so different from the West Coast, and he saw all the beautiful girls and the hippie life, well, he was gone. He stayed as long as they had the big the rock festival at the Avalon Ballroom. He was playing the drums, and that was the end of it for Ranchor. During the big kirtan at the Avalon Ballroom, Ranchor had become fascinated with the dance hall. He was on the stage playing the drums, but he saw all the hippies dancing together and all the drug taking and all the free love and everything. You didn't have that in New York, only in San Francisco. So he would sneak out from his service, lie to Prabhupada about his absence, and go looking for girls at the Avalon. One day he never returned. As one of the devotees reported to Prabhupada, he just disappeared into the strobe lights. The strobe lights were the big lights. As everyone was dancing, they would have lights bouncing off of the walls and everything. So Ranchor did come back once to ask Prabhupada for money so that he could return to his home in New York. Upendra, despite his weaknesses, was spontaneously attracted to Prabhupada and liked to be with him whenever he could. Sometimes Upendra would go up to the apartment with one or two other devotees and just sit in front of Prabhupada as Prabhupada sat on the thin pillow behind his low desk. Sometimes Prabhupada would continue reading or writing, and Upendra would sit and bask in his presence, simply watching him work. So this became a regular routine for Prabhupada. Even here, every evening, the temple would open at 4 o'clock or 4:30, and everyone would go for the kirtan. Everyone had to go for kirtan. It wasn't like now with so many devotees. There were just a handful of devotees. So you go to kirtan, and then after that, Prabhupada would have darshan, because Prabhupada would be busy all day, answering correspondence, translating, meeting with managers. This is any temple he was in, it would be the same schedule. But in the evening time, before the evening arti, he would have 1 hour of darshan in his room. And anyone who wanted, it was open darshan, anyone who wanted could come in and sit and ask Prabhupada questions, or Prabhupada would have readings going on, things like that. Conversations, the room conversations. We have hundreds of room conversations from that hour. And then at either 6:30 or 7 o'clock, when Sandhya Arti was starting, he would send everybody to the temple. So it started here. Also 26 Second Avenue, the devotees would come and be with Prabhupada, but here now in the evening time, they would come and sit with Prabhupada. He would read, sometimes they would read, or they would ask Prabhupada questions, or they would just sit and watch him. And he would be chanting his japa, they would also be chanting, just like we have in Prabhupada's house. Sometimes Prabhupada would continue reading or writing, and Upendra would sit and bask in his presence, simply watching him work. After 10 minutes or so, Prabhupada would look up and say, "All right, that's enough," and the boys would bow and leave. Upendra would also go to see Prabhupada taking his lunch. Remember, Prabhupada by that time had chosen the cook, Lilavati. So she was cooking for him, and Prabhupada taking his lunch, and Prabhupada would take some rice and vegetable from his plate, put them on a chapati, and offer them to Upendra. Although the prasadam was similar to the prasadam the devotees ate downstairs, Upendra thought that it tasted much better. It was called Maha Prasadam. We wouldn't when we cooked for Prabhupada, we wouldn't offer the prasadam first and then bring it to Prabhupada. We would just bring it to Prabhupada. And therefore we wouldn't put tulsi on the plate. It was first offered to Prabhupada, and Prabhupada would offer it to Krishna. And one time, Brahmananda, he came in to get Prabhupada's plate here, and Pishima was cooking and I was helping her. And he looked at us and he said, "Is it offered?" And we never would offer because we would offer it to Prabhupada. And Pishima, seeing he was very stern and, everyone was afraid of him. She just threw up her arms and she said, "Jai Nrsingadev!" Offered, he took the plate away. So. One day, when Upendra was alone with Prabhupada in his room, Prabhupada asked, "You are living with a young girl and people who take intoxicants?" For the second time, Upendra was convinced that Swamiji could read his mind and knew his entire life. "Yes," Upendra admitted, "but I am not having..." Prabhupada interrupted. "That is not good. Swamiji, I'm not having any sexual connections." Prabhupada knew better. "Where there is a boy and where there is a girl," Prabhupada said, "there is sex. You must come and live with me." Upendra was delighted. "Yes, I'll come immediately." He took a few belongings from his apartment, left everything else with his girlfriend, and moved into the front room of Prabhupada's apartment. He was now Swamiji's personal servant. Prabhupada requested him to keep his job at the post office. Around midnight, as soon as Upendra got off work, he would return to the apartment. Prabhupada always left the door unlocked for him. Usually, soon after Upendra locked the door, crawled into his sleeping bag, and fell asleep, he would be awakened by Prabhupada speaking into his dictating machine, composing teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Now, the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, that is a condensed synopsis of the teachings that Lord Chaitanya gave in the Chaitanya Charitamrita to Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami, Ramananda Roy, and different disciples. And Prabhupada, he had given 5 lectures in November of 1966, and that comprised the introduction of the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. If you read Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, is a wonderful, wonderful book. People don't read it so often now, but I read it again and again and again because the most essential teachings are there, and very, very, not just technical, but very, very deep explanation of the philosophy of Krishna consciousness in that book. So now Prabhupada was taking the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which he had brought with him he had brought the Bengali version, of course. It all fits into one book if it's only the Bengali. And now he was translating it and summarizing it in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So that's what he was working on at this time when Upendra came to live with him. This is Upendra. Upendra would nod off again and sleep until 6. Upendra relished this close association with his spiritual master and became always cheerful. "I just want to be Swamiji's dog." Vaishnavir Kurkura. So they didn't know the Bengali at that time, but he had that mentality. He just wanted to be a faithful servant of Srila Prabhupada. He would often tell the other devotees. One time Upendra was reading to himself from Srimad-Bhagavatam. So this is part of a purport. He was reading, of course, at that time we only had the first 3 volumes of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. So he was reading the first part. The whole subject matter is so presented through the lips of Srila Sukadeva Goswami that any sincere audience who will lend his ears submissively to this message of the transcendental world will at once relish the transcendental mellows distinguished from the perverted mellows of the material world. The ripened fruit is not dropped all of a sudden from the highest planet of Krishna Loka, but it has come down carefully, being handled by the chain of disciplic succession without any change or disturbance in the formation of the soft and ripened fruit. So this is Srila Prabhupada's books. If you read the original Srimad-Bhagavatams, those first 3 volumes that Prabhupada printed, his English is absolutely beautiful. And then later on, Prabhupada asked the devotees to edit it so that it would come up to the standard of American English, which is different from the Victorian English that he had learned. So this part of the purport comes from Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Volume 1, text number 3. Nigama kalpataror galitam phalam sukhamukhadat amritam draba samyutam. So this is from the original Bhagavatams, where Prabhupada, instead of using a V, he would use a B, which is in Bengali, the V and the B are interchangeable. Pibatas Bhagavatam rasamalayam muhuraho rasika bhuvibaba ukha. Oh, the expert and thoughtful men. So when Prabhupada asked Hayagriva to do the editing, one time he was editing and Prabhupada would use the expression, oh. So in one of the slokas it was, oh the king, meaning, oh king. So Hayagriva couldn't understand, was the name of the king oh? Because the grammatics was different. The way Prabhupada wrote, he had his way of writing. So Hayagriva would change the grammatics because he was an English professor. So, oh, the expert and thoughtful men, please know it that Srimad-Bhagavatam is the mature fruit of the desired tree of Vedic literatures, and it is emanated from the lips of Sri Sukadeva Goswami. For this, the nectarine fruit has become more tasteful, although it is already readily swallowable nectarine juice, which is relished by all up to those who are already liberated souls. So this is Prabhupada's beautiful English. Even if you read Srimad-Bhagavatam in the new versions, you should all get the opportunity to read these original Bhagavatams. They're in the archives, in the Veda base. They have all the 3 different, they have the original, then they have the 1972, then they have 1978, all different printings of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. So this is the original. So Prabhupada saw that Upendra was reading this section, and he asked, "You don't have any questions?" Prabhupada asked. Upendra looked up from the book. "No, Swamiji, I accept everything you say." Prabhupada began rocking strongly in his rocking chair and smiled as Upendra kept reading. Then Prabhupada taught Upendra the proper way to hold a book while reading, with both hands up off the lap. Like that. Not like this. See? Like this. 2 hands. This advice gave Upendra greater enthusiasm to please his spiritual master by reading his books. So these are the advantages of becoming a personal servant to the spiritual master. They see your mistakes and they're constantly correcting you and teaching you, and then you get to teach the other devotees what you learned. Upendra was still bothered by sexual desires. He thought that maybe he should get married, but he was confused about what a Krishna-conscious marriage was supposed to be. How could you be married, he puzzled, if you don't love the girl you want to marry? And how could you love her without having sex with her. He wanted to ask Swamiji about this, but he kept it to himself, waiting for an opportunity and for the courage. Then one day he entered Prabhupada's room as Prabhupada paced back and forth from one end of the room with its 3 large bay windows overlooking Frederick Street. These are the windows here. To the other end, where his rocking chair sat. Now, Upendra decided, he could ask his question. So, when Prabhupada would chant his japa, sometimes he would be sitting at his desk. For instance, when he would have the public darshan, he would be chanting his japa then. Sometimes on the morning walks, he would be chanting his japa. But when he was alone, he would pace back and forth. Just this, see this door right here? This door leads to Prabhupada's upstairs rooms. And he has a veranda in the front, his room, and then he has a long veranda in the back where none of you probably have ever gone because we keep it locked up there. But you can ask permission and you can go there. And every morning after Prabhupada would finish his dictations, he would go on that back veranda and pace back and forth, chanting his japa before Mangalartik. And they would come downstairs, chant his Gayatri, and then by 5 o'clock, 5:30, go out on his morning walk and chant more with the devotees then. So also you'll see videos of Prabhupada in Los Angeles temple, pacing in his room, and here in San Francisco as well, he would pace in his room from the entrance to the bay windows. Now, what are bay windows? Normally, a window is just flat coming at the wall. A bay window means they make an extension out of the wall to put extra windows so you get more sunlight. So there were big three windows for getting extra sunlight in Prabhupada's room, and Prabhupada would sometimes come to the windows and look down. Now you'll see what Prabhupada says. Swamiji, he began, may I ask a question? Yes, Srila Prabhupada replied, stopping his pacing. If a boy is separate from a girl, then how can he learn to love her? Prabhupada began to walk back and forth again, chanting on his beads. After a moment, he turned and said softly, Love? Love is for Krishna. And he walked toward the window and looked down at the street below. You want a girl? Pick one. He pointed towards some women passing on the street. There is no love in this material world, he said. Love is for Krishna. So, Prabhupada was teaching Upendra because without spiritual knowledge, there's only lust. There's only trying to seek a relationship on the bodily platform. Now Prabhupada was bringing Upendra and us, because we get to hear this, to a higher platform. The difference between love and lust. Love means to satisfy Krishna's senses, and lust means to satisfy our own senses. Gradually, under Srila Prabhupada's pure influence, Upendra began to feel less agitated by sexual demands. He came to understand that he was not a material body, but a spiritual soul, that the soul's eternal nature was to love Krishna, and that for a pure devotee, for Swamiji, love was for Krishna. More and more, Upendra just wanted to be the servant of Swamiji. He thought of what foods to buy for him and how to make things comfortable for him. It was in this mood of wanting to serve Swamiji that Upendra visited the psychedelic shop one day. He had heard they had recently received some prints from India So he went in and browsed through the prints, picked out some pictures of Lord Krishna, and took them to Swamiji. In Prabhupada's room, along with other devotees, Upendra unrolled the prints one by one on Prabhupada's desk, waiting to see Prabhupada's response. As Upendra watched, it seemed to him that Swamiji was looking at photos of his personal friend. He was pleased with the pictures. Hayagriva commented that the religious art of the Indian prince was a bit garish. Garish means just like when Harvey Cohen first saw the picture of the Panchatattva, he thought they were women. So because they're very effeminate, look, beautiful lotus eyes and the flowing hair and things like that. But Prabhupada explained that the technique didn't matter. The important thing was that the pictures were of Krishna and were executed according to Vedic descriptions. For the devotee, they were beautiful. They were non-different from Krishna. Now, one time the artists were here before the temple opened. They had come here to help with the grand opening. They were making, just like we saw at the 50th anniversary, the Astasaki dolls were made. So they had come here to make the Astasaki dolls for the real grand opening 50 years ago. And one of the artists decided to go into Loy Bazaar and get some pictures, just like Upendra did, but here we have so many more pictures, especially because the Brijbasi prints, they had their factory in Mathura. So beautiful paintings from the Brijbasi artists, the paintings that we still have, the Brijbasi prints. So she brought them and showed them to Prabhupada. And Prabhupada did not approve of the romantic pictures of Radha and Krishna. He said that they were not to be worshipped. And he didn't allow the devotees to display that. They were just imaginary, taking their lusty desires and imposing them upon Radha and Krishna. That was not the Vedic, as Prabhupada says here. The important thing, that pictures were of Krishna and were executed according to Vedic descriptions. So all of these lusty pictures of Radha and Krishna, Prabhupada did not approve of and did not allow the devotees to keep them. For the devotee, they were beautiful. They were non-different from Krishna. So when art is executed according to the Vedic descriptions, then non-different from Krishna. You can even worship a picture of Krishna. Before we had deities, we were, in all of our temples, we were worshiping the Panchatattva pictures, because that was all Prabhupada had originally given before deity worship was started. So devotees would decorate the picture. They would even put necklaces on the Panchatattva and, of course, garlands and things like that. And worship, we would offer our food to the pictures, because it was all we had, the pictures. So when done properly, the pictures are non-different from the Supreme Lord also. As Prabhupada last week or the week before described, that even the pure devotee, he's non-different from his picture as well. Prabhupada selected as his favorite a picture of Lord Krishna standing and playing his flute in the moonlight, the river Jamuna flowing by. In this picture, Krishna was known as Govinda. Prabhupada held the picture up and quoted a verse. So this verse later, we found out, comes from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila, chapter 5, verse 224. And originally, this verse is quoted from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, 1-239, in connection with practical devotional service. Smeram Bangi Traya parichitam sachivitirna drishtim Bangsinyasthadara kishalayam ujvalam chandrakena Govind akyam haritanu ita keshi tirtopakante ma prekshistas tava yadi sake bandhu sangesti rangaha. So on the spot, Prabhupada quoted this verse by heart. He knew it by heart. And then he gave a translation. He then took a sheet of paper and began writing, while the devotees watched him intently, listening to the scratching of the pen on the page. Then he read aloud, "My dear friend, if you still have an inclination to enjoy material life, society, friendship, and love, then please do not see the boy named Govinda, who is standing in a three-curved way, smiling and skillfully playing on his flute, his lips brightened by the full moonshine." Jamuna, can you write this nicely? So you'll see, this is in the downstairs temple room, this picture. Some of those pictures they took and they put on the wall behind Prabhupada all around the temple room, the ones that he approved of. Similar to what the devotees did at 26 2nd Avenue. They thought that Hanuman was a cat at that time. They didn't know who the pictures were of, but Prabhupada eventually told them all. Prabhupada knew that Jamuna was a trained calligrapher. So if you read Jamuna's biography that was written by her dear friend, it was compiled, Jamuna, she felt too humble to write a book, an autobiography. So after she went back to Godhead, her close associate compiled all of her memoirs and everything and printed the 2-volume book. And when she was living in Oregon, she studied under a very famous calligrapher who they write very beautifully. So she learned calligraphy, and she would make different certificates for Prabhupada, and he knew that she was very good at this art. He asked her to print the verse and display it, along with the picture, by his sitting place in the temple. He wanted to be able to look at it during kirtans. Upendra thought and prayed, "If I can just fix myself steadily in serving Swamiji, who has such love for Krishna, then I too will become transcendental." He felt that since it was not possible for him to see Govinda the way Swamiji saw him, he should serve Swamiji, the pure devotee of Govinda, and in that way become pure. "I just want to become Swamiji's dog," Upendra said as he left the apartment. So remember, Upendra had brought the pictures, and they stirred up in Prabhupada this beautiful sloka, and then the sloka became part of the whole temple atmosphere, because the picture and the sloka under it were then put in the temple room. In New York, now, suddenly the scene changes. We have bright, sunny California with all the devotees, 25 disciples now, and more devotees joining, and now we're back to New York, and you'll feel the change in the mood of Srila Prabhupada. In New York, the boys had their orders from Prabhupada not to give any more money to Mr. Price unless there was a purchase contract. Prabhupada still wanted the building. He had written to Brahmananda on March 4th, "I hope when I go to New York next, I shall enter the new house forthwith." And he had written Rairam on March 7th, "I'm very glad to learn that Brahmananda, yourself, and all others have the transcendental courage to take all risks for Krishna, and this act will enhance your glory in Krishna consciousness." But he wanted them not to be cheated by false promises. So Prabhupada could understand that Mr. Price was trying to cheat these young men, young boys. And Prabhupada warned them, do not give any more money to Mr. Price. Meanwhile, Mr. Price was asking the devotees to turn over $5,000 to his financier friend, Mr. Hall, who would then add $20,000 and make the down payment to the owner, Mr. Tyler. Now this was the trick. Mr. Price wanted Brahmananda to get the point across to His Excellency, he called Prabhupada His Excellency, that negotiations had to be done in this fashion and right away if they seriously wanted to get the house. So anytime someone tries to push you to give money immediately, you can immediately understand that they're trying to cheat you, right? And Prabhupada knew all of these things. And he was warning the devotees, don't give this man any more money. So now Mr. Price is saying, no, don't give it to me. Give it to my friend, Mr. Hall. And when you give him, try to understand the logic, the illogic. You give $5,000 and Mr. Hall will give $20,000. Now who's going to give? Prabhupada knew that they were just cheating these boys. Brahmananda wrote to Prabhupada asking him to advise the bank to transfer $5,000 into the account controlled by the boys. The trustees, remember every year there were different trustees, right? So these trustees had a bank account. But Prabhupada had to be the one to, because Prabhupada had his bank account and the temple had a bank account. Prabhupada had to transfer the money into the temple bank account. Prabhupada gave permission and asked that the check be signed by the president and secretary, because Brahmananda and Satsvarup are the main support for purchasing this house. Brahmananda was giving his $400, Satsvarup was giving his $400, and in that way the temple was being maintained. And Kirtananda is a supplement to this from his kitchen department. Kirtananda was in charge of the kitchen. But he said that the check should be made to the seller. That's the person who owned the house, Mr. Tyler. So now we have Mr. Price, the real estate agent. We have Mr. Hall, the financier. And we have Mr. Tyler, who actually owns the house. Not to the financier, Mr. Hall. Don't give the money to the financier, Prabhupada told them. The money and the society is yours, Prabhupada acknowledged. You can spend it in any way, but it is my duty to give you advice as ever well-wisher. Now you see, as the Acharya, what Prabhupada was doing. He was placing the responsibility of the society onto his disciples. He wasn't totalitarian, that he was trying to run everything. He was giving them responsibility. At the same time, he was giving them instructions. So this was the crucial test, whether they were going to follow his instructions or not. He told them what to do. Now were they going to listen to him? Then Mr. Price invited Brahmananda to meet Mr. Hall. And he suggested that Brahmananda come prepared with a check for $5,000. On the way, Mr. Price explained that Mr. Hall was perhaps the biggest real estate dealer in Manhattan, a multi-millionaire. He owned skyscrapers. Everything he owned was big. When Brahmananda entered Mr. Hall's office, he thought it was right out of a Hollywood movie. A conference room 10 times bigger than the 2nd Avenue Temple room. And seated at the head of the large oval table was Mr. Hall himself. The room was in semi-darkness, with a few spotlights on Mr. Hall, who sat before a battery of telephones. You know, important men, they have different telephones for different projects. So he had his telephones all set up there in front of him. Even as I began to discuss, Mr. Hall paused several times, picking up phones and talking to persons in various places across the country. "Young man," Mr. Hall said to Brahmananda, "we are helping you get the house. It is a beautiful house, a New York City landmark." Then Mr. Hall's girlfriend called from a boat in the Caribbean. He talked to her for a while and then returned to Brahmananda and Mr. Price, who sat in the shadows at his conference table. Mr. Hall had a big contract he wanted Brahmananda to sign. Brahmananda knew that Swamiji wanted a contract, and here it was. He also knew that if he signed over the $5,000, he would have no other money and no extra income. And he knew they knew it. They had nothing. There's some hippie who was sympathetic to the devotees had given them a $5,000 donation. Other than that, they were living just hand to mouth on the salary of Brahmananda and Satsvarup. So there was no other money aside from that $5,000, and Mr. Price understood that. He wanted to get that $5,000 anyway, anyhow. But Swamiji wanted the building. Swamiji himself had looked at $100,000 buildings and had offered to buy them, even though he had very little money to back his offers up. And Brahmananda always did whatever Swamiji said. To sign this contract, Brahmananda concluded, was an act of faith in Swamiji and Krishna. He didn't analytically ask, where will the rest of the money come from? To do so, he thought, would be like doubting Swamiji. All right, we've gone over time, as usual. So we're in suspense here. What is Brahmananda going to do? Stay tuned next Sunday. Hare Krishna.